Hello everyone and welcome back to the final chicane with me, Kristen Boylan. Okay, Italian Grand Prix review in Monza. I was actually at this race this time last year, so it's a bit depressing. Although it was a good race last year. There was just a few other obstacles in Monza that we had to overcome that weekend. It was a good race weekend though this weekend as well. Monza did not disappoint. And now we have a little break to absorb maybe everything that sort of happened during the last 2 weeks. Silly season is definitely back. I was complaining like 3 weeks ago how there hasn't actually been that much news recently, and now there's a little just too much to wrap my head around and to talk about. That's why these podcast episodes have just been getting longer and longer. But yeah, we have a bit of a break until Baku the weekend after next, which I think will be just as exciting of a race. But before we talk about everything to do with the Italian Grand Prix and the media moments before that, let's do Riddle of the Week. Son of a famous driver, I fought hard to win, claiming the F1 crown after struggles from within. In 1996 I shone, though I faced many trials, with a family legacy and a steely smile. Who is that? So wait until the end of today's episode to find out who I'm talking about there. But first, let's get into the media moments from this week, the Italian Grand Prix. Okay, so undoubtedly, the main media moment from this week was the news that Logan Sargeant will not be returning to Formula 1. He got fired, basically. Unfortunately, Williams decided not to continue with him for the rest of the season. It was sort of surprising and a bit not surprising because obviously Logan hasn't been doing as well as Williams would want him to be doing, as well as Logan himself would wanting to be doing and expected, I guess. I think the surprise more came at the timing of it. I just assumed if they were going to let Logan go, they would have done it over the summer break and not let him have one more race in Zandvoort. And then obviously he also had that crash in Zandvoort, which would have just made things so much mentally worse for him. Obviously being like, oh, if I didn't crash, would I still be here? Honestly, I think it was potentially set in stone over the summer break that he wouldn't be continuing, and they were just maybe looking for that last sort of excuse, or maybe there was timings on who they could get. They needed to wait and see. Stuff like that. But yeah, it was quite sad for Logan. He hasn't had the easiest time in Williams. There's been a few trials within the team itself. Obviously, it's been a mentally draining season for him, especially having your own car taken off you back in Australia and then being given the broken car the next weekend. And it was a long, painful road. And I'm sure I hope whatever Logan does next will be a bit kinder to him. A rumour, but now confirmed, that Logan only found out either the day before or the day of the announcement that he was going to lose his seat. Alex only found out the day of the announcement. And Franco said he only found out on the Monday. I think it was announced on the Tuesday. So, very tough. Very tough to be told a few hours before everyone in the world knows that you got fired, and without that preparation, because he was probably preparing to be driving at Monza this weekend, and all of a sudden he's out of a job. Yeah, you always got to sort of feel for the drivers in this sort of situation, but the team do have to, I guess, put their chance at points first, which did get me a little confused on why they chose a rookie to replace Logan. I definitely wasn't expecting that. I was expecting someone more in the hands of Mick Schumacher, who James Vales actually made an unfavourable comment about. I think he said he's not that great or whatever. And then Liam Lawson, who was rumoured, but the rumours there are that Red Bull would only give him to Williams if they could take him back, if they wanted to have him back at any point for the rest of the season. And obviously that's not an ideal situation for Williams to be in, for the potential to lose Liam, especially with how things are sort of looking at Red Bull. It is a possibility that Liam could be called in mid-season. I don't think it's going to happen, but also just as a reserve driver as well. But after this weekend, I do think that they definitely did make the right decision with Franco Colapinto, and I think he's going to have a successful rest of the season if this weekend is anything to go on anyway. What else happened this weekend? So Logan was out, Franco was in, and another driver, comes into Formula One. Kimi Antonelli was announced to be George Russell's teammate next year, replacing Lewis Hamilton as Lewis goes to Ferrari. Kimi also took part in a practice session. I'll talk more about Kimi when we get onto the practice sessions, but yeah, I am excited. I think Kimi is going to be a real talent in the future. He hasn't had the best cars under him in his previous series, but he's done his best with what he has, and yeah, Mercedes already seem to love him. Also, just staying on the lines of driver market, silly season news, there's 2 seats left now. Those 2 seats being V-Carb and Stake, and both those seats obviously currently being occupied by a driver without this driver is leaving Formula One. So that's going to get a bit tricky. For Audi, it really doesn't look like they're going to stick with either Joe or Bottas. We already have Hulk in Audi, so we already know for a fact one is gone, but it does look more likely that both might be gone, and I don't want to see Joe or Bottas leave Formula One, but that just might be the way it is. The V-Carb seat is definitely a bit more of a tricky one, because I think they had expected Daniel to be doing better by now and to have him in Red Bull, and then Liam Lawson comes into V-Carb. But Daniel hasn't proved himself enough to join Red Bull, which they sort of confirmed when they re-signed Perez for this year. But also recently, I think he's improved enough to keep his seat, which is very conflicting, because in September, by next week, apparently Liam Lawson needs to either be signed by Red Bull or he will be free to go to another team. I think with the likeliness that Liam Lawson will be in either V-Carb or Red Bull soon enough, he probably won't choose to go to another team unless, I don't know, because if he is getting offered, say, a stake seat, is he going to take that and risk leaving the Red Bull family when he might have that opportunity to join Red Bull, but also he might throw away that Formula One seat and end up not getting a Formula One seat again with Red Bull. So it's definitely a bit of a risky situation. I don't know. Right now, I don't think Daniel deserves to be let go from V-Carb. He's definitely been the better V-Carb driver, I'd say, in the last maybe 2 months. But then Yuki completely dominated the first half of the season. So it is hard to know. And obviously Red Bull were trying to reformat the V-Carb team so they're not just like a junior team for Red Bull, but then Helmut Marko was saying that the sponsors wanted to be a junior team, so there's just a bit of trickiness there. But yeah, what I was going to say about that point is that Daniel said that he is pretty sure he and we will know about his future by the end of September, October. So in the next 2 months, maybe Daniel fans can have a few less sleepless nights soon. For me, in the way he said it, it doesn't sound like he knows what his future is going to be. It doesn't sound like he has anything set in stone. He said that he wants to be in Formula One. To me, yeah, it's sort of, I feel like it might be on the rocks right now if he gets his seat. It might be a whole Daniel loses his V-Carb seat. Obviously, he has another year contract with Red Bull, but that means that they can keep him on as a third driver, as a reserve driver, so they could go back to Daniel, Red Bull third driver, see how Perez does next year and either promote Daniel to that Red Bull seat or see how Liam does if they put Liam in the seat. I think what I would do if I was in Red Bull's position was keep Daniel and Yuki in V-Carb, risk offering like Liam the third driver role and reserve driver for V-Carb, sort of what he's doing now, but just like sort of make the role look more pleasant, and say you will 100% be getting this Red Bull seat in 2026 or the V-Carb seat, whichever it is, because realistically they probably won't want to keep Daniel in V-Carb, decided that he'll be good enough to move to Red Bull, or there's not really too much point of having him in V-Carb depending on what the dynamic within that team stays. So I would keep Daniel and Yuki for 2025. You might lose Liam, but I don't know. If Perez is doing alright, keep him in it. If he needs replacing next year, if he doesn't improve, see how Daniel does, unless Daniel takes another dip, because we've seen that, and just work from there. Instead of what they did this year, but give it one more year. I don't know, it's so hard. Anyway, staying on the lines of V-Carb, actually, they do have updates for this weekend. A few teams have updates. Ferrari also. V-Carb's updates are more to the floor, and they sort of brought the updates earlier than they intended to. I think they're intending to bring them next week, but they brought them this week, so only Yuki had them on his car because obviously they would pick the better driver, the top driver, for the upgrades. And we will talk about how those upgrades looked later on. What other news did we have today? Monza track got resurfaced, new curbs and stuff. Drivers weren't too happy about the new curbs. They said that it just took away some of like the feel that they loved about Monza. It didn't take away from any of the racing, at least. What was the drama from last week? The drama from last week was Lando's radio message, and this drama carried on to this week. Obviously, last week Lando won Max's home race in Zandvoort, and when he won, he said on the radio, "Simply lovely," which, if you don't know, is Max's saying. It first came about, I don't know, I think it was just a Daniel and Max video back when they were teammates in Red Bull, and Max said "simply lovely" or something, and he's been saying that sort of since, his sort of catchphrase, I guess. So Lando said that after he bet Max last week, and yeah, sort of divided the Formula One internet. A lot of people thought it was disrespectful to Max, especially to his home race, and when Max is on that decline, and then everyone was like, no, they're best friends. Like, it was obviously a joke. Max would have found it funny. Daniel was asked about that this week, and he said that, he said the pleasure of being teammates with both Max and Lando, and he knows they're friends, he's friends with both of them, but he says he doesn't think Max would have taken it too well. He doesn't think Max would have found it funny. Maybe it would have gave Max this extra little anger to try and beat Lando this weekend. And then Max said, yeah, he just doesn't really care. I think more than likely, I definitely don't think Max would have found it funny. I'd say it probably did bother him. My opinion is that it would have bothered him a little bit, but not that Lando intended it like that. I don't know why Lando said it though. I don't know, it's confusing. I think it has been made a way bigger deal than it should be. But yeah, obviously things are tense between Lando and Max fans right now, because I'm sure they used to sort of be on the side of both drivers, a lot of them, but now since Lando's turning to be a real competitor to Max, and they might be getting a bit tense with each other. Anyway, let's talk about free practices. So these free practices were actually more interesting and a lot to look at than usual, because we had two drivers doing not their first free practice sessions. We had a rookie, Kimi Antonelli, who wasn't a full-time Formula 1 driver when he did that. And then we had Franco Colapinto, who's doing his first FP session as a full-time, halfway, mid-season Formula 1 driver. And Kimi was looking strong. He was doing fast times. He was setting faster times than some people on the same tyres who even went after. He looked very impressive, but I think he just pushed too far in the end. He obviously wanted to show his best. He knew that announcement was coming the next day, so that was probably weighing on him, and he was like, no, I need to show everyone that this is the right decision. And he just pushed it too far and crashed. Luckily, he was okay with that crash. Sort of a high enough impact crash, but he didn't destroy the car. The car was fixable. Toto didn't seem too upset by it. George either. I do feel bad that he crashed though, because obviously he knew that would have just added to the tension and because we all know what social media is like. Everyone's going to complain about something. So that was sort of the last thing he needed, and the good laps he did earlier were erased from everyone's memory because of that crash. And then it was more Mercedes messed up by choosing Kimi. I don't think they did. I think Kimi is a rising star, and I'm excited to see him. Franco also had a little spin. Was it after? It might have been after actually the time went out, but that's always just because they're finding their limits. So I never think that's anything to look down on. I guess most of the time the drivers are spinning out because they're pushing right to the limit and they need to find the limit, and that's why there's more spin outs in practices than there is in the actual race usually. And it happens to everyone. Magnussen crashed in FP2. Kimi Raikkonen was there in the Steak Sauber garage for the free practices as well with his kids, and his kids all met Max. They're Max fans apparently, and they're all wearing their Sauber merch. I don't think I've seen Kimi, has he even been at Formula 1 since he retired? I don't think so. I feel like I haven't seen him on my screen since 2021. He retired in 2021, didn't he? But yeah, it was nice to see two Kimmys in the paddock that weekend. From what we could tell from free practices, Alpine not looking as strong as they used to be, but Ferrari also not looking like anything special. That sort of changed. To be honest, I don't think the Ferrari was anything special that weekend. Talk about that later. Let's move into quali. I'm actually moving through this faster than usual. Quali, my main takeaway from quali was, because I was sort of had my eye more on Franco because I wanted to see how he would do, was that he was looking really, really strong. Obviously, up until the end, he went into the gravel. Even if he did another lap, like, the battery wouldn't have been charged, the tyres would have been ruined. But he was looking like he could have had the potential to make it out of Q3 in that one. He didn't. I don't know exactly if the times before he went off was going to be enough to get him into Q2. I also know that obviously with that yellow flag being there and Magnussen or Hulk, I think it was Magnussen going off, may have potentially ruined some of the other times. You always want to be able to at least try, but he had a good weekend and he'll definitely score points, Franco. Piastri was having a nightmare of a weekend. By this point, he had like, his things came in threes, like impeding and everything. And then you had the unsafe release. Luckily, it was just a team fine because that wasn't anything on Oscar. Driving wise, he was good, but those unlucky things sort of just kept popping into place for him. Tsunoda went out in Q3, which I think was probably the biggest surprise of going out in Q3, especially with the upgrades. VCarb definitely looked like they were expecting him to be the one up there. I'm sure they were hoping for a Q3 or a Q1 appearance. I always get them mixed up. But yeah, I'm not completely sure what happened with Yuki this weekend, but he wasn't really on it from the start. Obviously, we know what happened in the race. His teammate Daniel did get through to Q2, but he finished P12 in the end, I think, P13. The interesting thing is that, though, VCarb said that they're pretty sure the upgrades are working, because obviously the data, they can tell by the data, the parts that they brought the upgrades in to improve, those sectors, whatever it is, improved, but the overall time just didn't improve. So like the time loss was somewhere that wasn't because of the upgrades. That's what they were saying, that's what Daniel said. So he said he's not worried about when he gets them next week, like hopefully they'll have it figured out, or I haven't heard Yuki's opinion on it yet, but I think we should keep an eye on that to see if maybe it doesn't suit Yuki's style of driving as much, or see what the issue is there. Yeah, and then the biggest surprise again was how much Max was struggling. His car seems to be very understeery. We know since forever Max has the better oversteery style of driving. The car was more oversteery earlier this year. There is the whole rumours, is it rumours or is it confirmed that they changed the car a little to suit Perez more? Potentially, if Perez's style is more understeery, that could be what's wrong, because they could have been thinking, Max will be able to drive the car no matter what. We may as well change it to try get Checo up there for the constructors, but that has backfired. And now both cars are not doing well, and Max is seriously struggling, which is really harming his chance at the championship this year. He's keeping quite calm, he's keeping quite level-headed about it all. Honestly, sometimes when he's P1, he sounds more stressed than he did this weekend on the radio. But maybe he's having fun now that he has to fight some more. And then Lando on pole with his teammate, just showing how incredibly fast that McLaren actually is. Right in P2, Verstappen nearly 7/10 off pole. I feel like that's a little crazy considering it was sort of the opposite way around for most of the year. Now he's 7/10 off the McLarens. Albon and Hulk again, some of the best, the two best midfield drivers on the grid, no doubt about it. P9, Hulk P10, somehow they have managed to drag their cars into Q1 when their teammates can't. Q3, Q1, Q3, Q1, Q3, when their teammates can't. So impressive as always. And Leclerc P4, just over 1/10 off of pole. Oscar again, just about 1/10 off pole as well. Looking better for Ferrari, but still nothing spectacular from Ferrari. It wasn't a place where I was like, they have it this weekend, they're going to win. And then the race, God, Twitter was an awful place last night. I remember how excited Oscar and Lando fans were when Oscar first joined McLaren, talking about how much better their teammate dynamics will be, and excited to get rid of Daniel fans probably out of the team. And now, well, how the tables have turned. God, I think they have to be the fandom's of like the team that hate each other the most right now. So obviously Lando qualified on pole. He is Max's biggest competitor right now. McLaren brought in this whole Papaya rules system about, which is basically just give each other enough space, don't take each other out, stuff like that. So the first thing to note is that they weren't given any team orders. Oscar was given permission to fight Lando at the start. If you're given permission to fight at the start as a Formula 1 driver, you're going to fight at the start and you're not going to stick behind your teammate no matter what. For once, when Lando's on pole, he got a good start. He did get a good start. Piastri got a better start. He also might have been on just the better side of the track. But Lando has said himself that Piastri is better at starting than himself. So although Lando did have a good start, Piastri just had that pace in him and he made a phenomenal overtake. I'm sorry, but the only thing I was thinking about when I saw that overtake was overtake of the year. That one is challenging Albon's earlier on this year. It was such a good overtake. Could have been risky. They could have crashed out, but they didn't. Oscar executed it well. The hate Oscar got for taking the lead of the race when Oscar was given permission to take the lead of the race is so insane to me. In one hand, I understand how tense Lando fans must be because they would need McLaren to be prioritising Lando right now because he has such a good chance of a championship. I know, it's not like he's 10 points away. He's quite a few points away. But obviously, as a fan of that driver, you're going to want him to be prioritised by the team. And then with the whole sort of guilt trip in Lando to give the win or the position back to Oscar, which let Oscar win the race ultimately. Obviously, that frustration has been building up, but take it out on the team. It's not Oscar's fault. If Lando wasn't asked to give that position to Oscar, he wouldn't have. If Oscar wasn't asked to, protect Lando at the start, so he didn't. And he had a better start, so I don't see a problem on Oscar's side of any of that. And I think it's quite unfair to be calling him not a team player because of that. And, this is Formula 1. Everyone's always complaining about, the drivers are too soft with each other, we need the rivalries back. And then, there's the slightest one driver prioritising his own race over his teammates, and all hell breaks loose. So yeah, you can feel for Lando not getting the best, maybe support from the team there without turning your backs on Oscar completely. And then disaster just decided to happen for the Haas's and the V cars for the rest of the race. Daniel squeezed Hulk. Daniel admitted to squeezing Hulk. And he got a 5-second penalty for that. I was like, 5 seconds, fine, he can make that up. Little did I know what was to come. Then at the same time, Tsunoda and Hulk, once Hulk was pushed back, was then where with Tsunoda they had an incident and Tsunoda ultimately had to retire the car because of that. Very unfortunate for Tsunoda. He really didn't do much wrong. Obviously he didn't have the fastest start of the weekend, but it was out of his hands from that point, and definitely disappointed that he didn't get to see the upgrades in the car with long runs in the race. So yeah, that's not anything on Yuki. That was just, obviously it was a Hulk fault. He got a 10-second penalty for that. So then Daniel went to sit his penalty, and really unfortunate, and I really feel for the mechanic. The mechanic touched the car to stop it, just like out of reflex. And you can see as soon as he yanked his hands away, and he was shaking his head, and he just seemed devastated after he actually did it. Yeah, that caused Daniel to get a 10-second penalty. Ultimately, it just dropped him back one place. He wasn't in the points anyway. So hopefully that was a bit of comfort for that one mechanic, and Daniel didn't really point fingers at the mechanic after the race anyway, so hopefully he feels okay. If you're the mechanic out there listening, I hope you're okay. Ferrari actually didn't have what seemed to be the best strategy going. So Lando ended up undercutting Charles, which seemed better at the time. McLaren knew that they would have to pit twice. They knew that they wouldn't make it on those tyres throughout the whole thing. Lando didn't have the cleanest race, though. Also, he had that bit of a lock up into the pits where he hit the Bullard, and that's what it's called, Bullard, I think. And then he went off as well, which widened the gap between him and Piastri as well. Yeah, it wasn't Lando's best race ever. He definitely made a few mistakes, but I'm sure the start threw him off a little. Max also had a slow stop because what else could go wrong for Max Verstappen right now? And then, at that point, Lando and Oscar were given the go-ahead to, again, fight for position, which Oscar ultimately held on to after. I think Lando had closed the gap significantly, which was very impressive of Lando. But then he fell back to like 5 seconds after was it the gravel that he went into, or he just went off a bit anyway. And then Magnussen got a share of the Haas penalties. He got his 10-second penalty, and Magnussen was flying. He was going so well. He finished in the points despite the 10-second penalty, which I thought was so impressive. He was going well all weekend, to be honest. It was just a disappointment in the end that the outcome happened that we know happened. Oh, Magnussen. Alpine didn't look like they had the best pace all race. I mean, they didn't have the pace. Gasly, who was definitely looking stronger before, sort of fell back a bit to Ocon this weekend. Again, I think they're quite consistent with each other. Magnussen Slay is what I wrote next, because Slay, Magnussen. And then, to again see that raw pace from the McLaren when Lando was going up against Max. A very clean overtake from Lando, very well done. But also, Lando just disappeared ahead, which really showed the difference when it was like close fights where you weren't sure who was going to come out. It was just basically like almost like blue flagging. Lando made it look that easy. And Colapinto, just outside of the points for most of the race, was going so well. I think P13 most of the race. Daniel was in front of him, P12. The strategies. Only a few drivers on the grid could have pulled off the strategies like those Ferraris. Charles on the one stop. Not only Charles on a one stop, but on a one stop in Monza that just annihilates your tyres is actually insane. Charles is a tyre whisperer. A few people were on a one stop. Daniel was on the one stop the longest. He was on his however many laps there were, just take 10 from that, and that's how long Daniel was on those tyres for. And his fastest pace was like near enough the end of the race on those tyres. So unfortunately, despite the penalties, Daniel actually had a really good race, and he finished P12 behind Alonso, but then obviously he gets that 10-second penalty added on afterwards, which did look to be the better decision than obviously boxing him again, and so he went behind Franco then. He only lost one position though, because Ocon behind, both him and Franco had made up that gap to Ocon, which was good. Again, Franco being up there in the first place is very impressive and a real show of what to expect from the rest of the year for Franco. So Daniel and Charles and Magnussen, definitely the tyre whisperers of the Monza Grand Prix. Hulk, I don't know completely what happened to Hulk, if he had damage or whatever, but he made no moves. He stayed P19 with Yuki being P20 after his DNF, which is really disappointing obviously because he qualified P10 and he had a really good chance of points. But and Magnussen was defending him again in the media after. He's like, I don't get why I got 10 seconds and Daniel only got 5 seconds for what he did to Hulk and everything like that. Love that friendship right there. And I've been to a few Grand Prix now, and the energy from the Tifosi at Monza when I was there, I just loved it. Like, I just wanted Ferrari to do well at that, just so they would be happy. So watching it from home this time, I was so happy for the Ferrari to be on the podium, for all the Tifosi, and the cheers. The cheers were the cutest things ever. Was it Ted who was like down and you could pick it up on his microphone, the cheers of the crowd? I wish I was there for that. But Carlos also did well. It was Carlos who did well when I was there, wasn't it? I think Carlos might have came P2 or something. Carlos has actually done well every race that I have been to. Just saying. He won Silverstone when I was there. Might be Carlos's good luck charm. And Leclerc, even with those old tyres, he almost ran away with it. Obviously, Piastri did pick up time on him in the end, but it would have taken a lot more laps of Charles on those tyres for Piastri to catch up on him. So Charles really just did a great time. 3 laps left and Piastri was like 7.5 seconds behind Charles and Lando was behind that. So Charles winning was very special. The Monaco anthem and the Italian anthem, always a nice combination. I don't know what it is with Charles and Monza, but he just seems to come alive at Monza. No matter how the Ferrari is that year, it's going to do its best at Monza. Obviously, apart from the year after he won Norris got the fastest lap, so he was definitely the faster of the McLarens, but Oscar did stay ahead. So yeah, I wouldn't exactly say that the Ferrari upgrades did an incredible job. I think that they just got the strategy right, and they had the two right drivers to work that strategy and to, make the best outcome out of that strategy. So that was quite impressive, I think. And then the biggest news of the day came after the race, that Kevin Magnussen received a race ban. Obviously, with his 10-second penalty came 1 or 2 penalty points, and that was enough to drive him over the edge of the maximum amount of penalty points you're allowed to get. His other ones haven't refreshed yet. I'm not sure when they were supposed to refresh, or at least some of them. But yeah, he has received a race ban. He won't be racing in Azerbaijan. That doesn't mean that only one Haas will be racing. It just means Kevin won't be racing. So obviously another Haas. So obviously they just need to get another driver in there. The obvious choice would be next year's driver, Ollie Behrman, but that is up to Ferrari if they want to keep Ollie just in case they need that reserve driver. I think what they will probably do is similar to what Visa Cash App were doing, was they'll be like, yeah, you can have Ollie for Haas, but if one of our drivers is unable to race next week, we'll take him. But for one race, that would be a risk they're willing to take, because what are the odds that one of the Ferrari drivers won't be able to race next weekend? So I'd say it will be likely we will see Ollie Behrman in the car, which I'm excited about. If you remember how well he did in the Ferrari, filling in for Carlos Sainz when he got his appendix out this year. But yeah, Kevin did seem quite upset after the race and angry, and yeah, there was a few media moments. Everyone coming over to congratulate Charles was really nice. I feel like when Charles wins, everyone is happy in the world. The world is at peace. Because he doesn't win all that often. Like, he has some of the most incredible wins, but like, it's never boring to see Charles win, if you get me. Also, I'll just read out Daniel's opinion on his incident with Hulk, because this is probably why I like Daniel a lot. Formula 1 Daniel, Danny Rick, if you will. Because of his attitude, particularly here, I think he's probably the driver who would most likely be able to take blame and responsibility when he messes up and put his hand up and admit that he messed up. He said, obviously, I didn't give him enough room, period, so the least I can do is apologise. I was also curious how bad it was. I knew I was in the wrong, but was it something that he wanted to punch my face in, or was it something that he was just like, yeah, you misjudged it by 10 centimetres? Obviously, he said, yeah, you didn't give me enough room. I also wanted to ask, like, did I kind of jerk, or did I just progressively move across? I like to be aggressive, but I'm not dirty, so I wanted to make sure, from his point of view, was it just aggressive, or was I being a bit of a prick? It just brings me back. Remember when Daniel took out Carlos in Imola and went to Ferrari garage to apologise to all of the mechanics, and obviously Carlos himself, and Carlos was like asked if he's like angry about Daniel, and he was like, listen, Daniel apologised and everything, like, it's Daniel, you can't be mad at him when you know, like, there was no bad intention there. The only thing that Daniel, I feel like, is never going to take full responsibility for is Baku, which he shouldn't. It was a team effort. What should we do? Riddle of the week. So this week's riddle of the week answer is Damon Hill. So still in Formula 1, still doing a bit with Sky Sports. Damon Hill's entry into Formula 1 was nothing short of extraordinary. He was born in 1960 in London. He's English, and he grew up with obviously racing in his family. His dad, Graham Hill, an incredible racer and world champion. Also, obviously, a big pair of shoes to fill. I'd say obviously that's really a lot of pressure going into racing when you have like a world champion in your family. So he started karting and basically led him straight to British Formula 3. So he only started karting in, the 80s. And very quickly he made his way to British Formula 3. And then by 1992 he made his F1 debut with Brabham. It wasn't until he joined Williams just as a test driver in 1993 that things started to look a bit fiery for him. So 1993, 1994, not the easiest years to be in Formula 1. 1993 though, Damon got his first win at the Hungarian Grand Prix, which sort of was the start of what would be a great journey. Obviously 1994, the difficulties there was the whole Formula 1 community dealing with the loss of Ratzenberger and obviously Ayrton Senna. And then Damon became the world champion in 1996 for Williams. And his history, a little bit of history there, was that he was the first ever son of a world champion to also be a world champion. Huge moment. And also, like, I'd say it was quite an emotional thing for him to honour Graham and everything in that way. I don't know if I've done Graham Hill yet as a riddle of the week. So yeah, post-retirement, which is the era of Damon Hill that we are in right now, Damon shifted to become a popular commentator with Sky Sports. He also does a lot of work with mental health charities and has used his platform quite for the better. There's actually 3 Hill World Championships: Graham Hill, Phil Hill and Damon Hill. Graham Hill and Phil Hill were, I can't remember who won it first. Potentially Phil Hill won first, then Graham Hill. But I'm pretty sure Graham and Phil Hill were simultaneous. Is that right? Simultaneous years? Like, is that the word? Like, one next to each other? Was it the 1960s? Potentially 1962, 1963 maybe? Not too sure on my dates there. But yeah, that was the riddle of the week. Damon Hill. Well, we've reached the end of today's episode. I do see the comments and recognise, like, oh, this username has commented before and stuff like that, which I think is so nice, because, like, I'm glad that I've managed to somehow keep some people and you haven't got bored of me just yet. Give it time. But yeah, I'll see you for the Baku review. Bye guys.